On the morning of the 19th of June, 1944, hundreds of young men took flight, the cream of Japan's remaining naval aviators, their hearts filled with duty, their minds drilled in discipline, their eyes locked on the horizon. But only a handful would ever return. Within hours, their wings would be torn from the sky, not by fate, but by steel, radar, and cold American firepower. This was not just a battle. It was the day the Japanese Empire's dreams of naval air dominance died, not with a final blow, but in a silent, spiraling collapse witnessed over a deep blue stretch of ocean, the Philippine Sea. Why did Japan's most modern aircraft carriers fall so quickly? How did its best pilots, descendants of the warriors of Midway and Pearl Harbor, get swept from the skies in what American airmen called a turkey shoot? And what does it mean, in the heart of an empire, when the men trained to protect it are sent into battle knowing they are not coming back? The setting is June 1944, Japan, now 3 years deep into the Pacific War, is reeling. Its early triumphs, from the shock of Pearl Harbor to the rapid seizure of Southeast Asia, are becoming distant memories. The tide has turned. Island after island has been wrested back by the Allies in a grinding campaign of amphibious assaults, naval blockades, and ceaseless bombardments. The next domino is the Marianas. Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, these islands, under Japanese control since World War I, hold immense strategic value. If the United States seizes them, they can station B-29 bombers within striking distance of Tokyo itself. For the Japanese High Command, this cannot be allowed. They conceive Operation Ago a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble to destroy the U-100S fleet in a decisive naval battle. Their plan is elegant in theory. Vice Admiral Hisaburo Osawa, commanding Japan's remaining carrier strength, will lure the Americans into a trap. Using 9 aircraft carriers and more than 450 aircraft at sea, plus 300 land-based aircraft stationed in the Marianas, he will attack the American fleet while it is busy protecting the landings on Saipan. The battle will be fought to the east of the Marianas, giving the Japanese the benefit of easterly winds crucial for propeller aircraft that need headwind to launch. But there's a catch. Japan is running out of fuel. The fleet is stationed far to the south, near the oil-rich region of Borneo. The crude oil being used is unrefined and volatile, filling the ships with fumes and danger. What's more, the fleet's position is exposed and American submarines are watching. On the American side, Admiral Raymond Spruance leads Task Force 58, the most powerful naval force in the world, centered around 15 carriers with nearly 900 aircraft. His mission: protect the invasion of Saipan at all costs. Though eager for a decisive fight, he is wary of being lured away from the beachhead by Japanese decoys. Nevertheless, the clash is inevitable. On June 15th, U.S. Marines storm Saipan. 3 days later, Japanese scout planes locate Task Force 58. It's time. Ozawa gives the order. From the deck of the newest Japanese carrier, Taiho, pride of the fleet aircraft, begin launching into the morning sky. Aboard the nearby U.S. submarine Albacore, Commander Blanchard watches in silence and waits. At 9 a.m., he fires. With no firing solution from his torpedo computer, Blanchard launches 6 torpedoes by eye at Taiho. One torpedo is destroyed mid-sea by a heroic Japanese pilot who dives his plane into it. But another finds its mark. It punches a hole into Taiho's forward starboard side, rupturing fuel lines and jamming the elevator deck. Damage control insists the carrier can still function, but the fumes have begun to spread. Taiho is now a floating bomb elsewhere in the Pacific sky, the first wave of 69 Japanese aircraft approaches Task Force 58. American radar operators aboard USS Alabama pick them up at a range of 72 miles. Fighter direction officers give the order, "Hey Rube," the signal for imminent enemy attack. Hundreds of Grumman F-6F Hellcats scramble from the carriers. More than 220 fighters rise to meet the threat. Above 17. Oh, 0 feet. The sky turns deadly. The Japanese formation breaks apart almost instantly. Young, barely trained Japanese pilots, many on their first combat mission, are annihilated before they can even glimpse an American warship. Lieutenant G. R. Carr becomes an ace within minutes, downing 5 planes. His wingman, Commander Brewer, shoots down 4. Similar scenes play out across the sky. Of the 69 aircraft in the first wave, only 27 limp back, some to Guam, others to shattered carriers. None strike a serious blow. The second wave fares no better. This time, 107 Japanese aircraft approach, led by Lieutenant Commander Akira Terui. Once again, they orbit to regroup. And once again, the Americans intercept their radio communications thanks to a Japanese-speaking officer aboard the USS Lexington. The Hellcats are waiting at 11:39 a.m. U.S. Fighters fall upon the approaching formation. Commander David McCampbell, who will become the Navy's top ace, downs 5 planes in minutes. Lieutenant Alexander Vrasiu scores 6. The battle is so one-sided that a U.S. weapons officer jokes, holding up a scratch on his finger. The bastards have finally drawn blood. Of the 107 aircraft in the second wave, only 10 survive. What happened over the Philippine Sea on the 19th of June, 1944, was not just a tactical failure for the Japanese Empire, it was a complete unraveling of its aerial warfare doctrine. To understand why the Turkey Shoot was possible, we must rewind not just to Midway, but to the core philosophies that had shaped Japanese naval aviation for over a decade. In the 1930s, Japan's naval air service was the envy of the Pacific. It trained its pilots with a rigor unmatched by other nations. Selection was brutal, survival and training uncertain, and those who made it to a cockpit were truly elite. Their greatest weapon was not the Zero fighter, though it was formidable, but the experience of the men who flew them. By 1941, these pilots had mastered the art of long-range carrier strikes, as demonstrated at Pearl Harbor and in the rapid conquest that followed. But there was a catch, one that would cost them dearly. Japan never built a second generation of airmen, while the United States, with its vast industrial base and population, invested in large-scale pilot training programs. Japan retained its boutique elite structure. It never scaled. When the veterans of Pearl Harbor and Coral Sea fell at Midway and Guadalcanal, their replacements were rushed through inadequate training, often with only 100 hours of flight time, many never having flown in formation, much less combat. What Ozawa launched on the 19th of June was a skeleton air force, bold in intention, but hollow in execution. His assumptions were outdated. He believed that Guam's land-based fighters were still operational and had scored heavy victories. He did not know that Guam had lost 35 planes for almost no return, a slaughter. He believed the Americans would be on the defensive. He was wrong. Worse still, coordination broke down. Overeager sub-commanders launched early. Strike packages became fragmented. Instead of overwhelming Task Force 58 with simultaneous strikes from land and sea, the attacks came in predictable waves, exactly what U.S. radar and fighter direction officers were trained to handle. Meanwhile, the American Hellcat was rewriting the laws of air superiority. The F-6F Hellcat wasn't elegant like the Zero. It was big, durable, heavily armed, and most importantly, it could absorb punishment, unlike the Zero, which lacked armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. The Hellcat could dive, roll, climb, and keep fighting. Its 50 caliber machine guns shredded enemy planes. Its speed and rate of climb allowed American pilots to dictate engagements, but hardware alone did not win the day. The U.S. Navy had mastered radar-guided interception and layered air defense. Fighter direction centers aboard every carrier coordinated combat air patrols, feeding real-time information to squadrons using vectoring. It was the fusion of technology, doctrine, and discipline, a machine of men and metal that could react, adapt, and destroy with terrifying efficiency. And that machine was just getting started. Back aboard Taiho, the damage was worsening. Earlier in the day, her elevator had jammed. Fuel vapor was leaking throughout the ship. At 2:30 p.m., a catastrophic mistake sealed her fate. The ship's inexperienced damage control team, in a fatal move, activated the carrier's internal ventilation system in the hope that the vapor would dissipate. Instead, it was distributed throughout every deck. At 4:30 p.m., a spark likely from an electric generator ignited the fumes. A thunderous explosion tore through Taiho, lifting her armored flight deck and igniting a firestorm within the hangar. Vice Admiral Ozawa narrowly escaped death. Convinced by his staff to abandon ship and transfer to the cruiser Haguro, Taiho, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, commissioned less than a year earlier, burned for hours. At 7:28 p.m., she sank, taking 1,650 men to the bottom. She had never landed a successful blow against the enemy. But Taiho was not the only casualty of the day. Earlier that afternoon, the U.S. submarine Kavala had sighted Shokaku, one of the last remaining Japanese carriers to have survived Pearl Harbor and Coral Sea. At 12:20 p.m., Kavala fired a spread of torpedoes. 4 struck home. Shokaku, like Taiho, was filled with volatile Borneo fuel. Flames engulfed the ship in minutes. Despite heroic efforts by the crew, at 3 p.m., she exploded and sank. Over 1,200 sailors were lost. In one day, Japan had lost 2 of its most powerful carriers not to airstrikes, but to American submarines operating with stealth, precision, and devastating efficiency. By sunset, the surviving elements of Ozawa's force were scattered, bleeding, and running low on aircraft, but the battle was not yet over. Back aboard Task Force 58, Admiral Mark Mitcher had a decision to make. At 3:40 p.m., an American scout plane spotted the remnants of the Japanese fleet nearly 275 miles away. With only a few hours of daylight left, Mitcher faced a brutal choice: launch a massive strike at long range, knowing many of his aircraft would have to return in the dark, or wait and risk the enemy slipping away. Mitcher chose to strike. At 4:10 p.m., the signal was given: pilots, man your planes. By 4:30 p.m., nearly 240 aircraft had lifted off from 11 American carriers, fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes raced toward the setting sun, engines roaring, fuel tanks dangerously near empty. They flew with fury. They flew with faith. They knew they might not come back. The final act of the Battle of the Philippine Sea began in twilight. American aircraft, 240 strong, raced westward into fading sunlight, their shadows trailing across the waves like ghosts. They flew not in formation, but as a scattered storm, each squadron tasked with hunting down the remnants of the Japanese mobile fleet. It was an attack born of desperation, courage, and the relentless American will to finish what had begun that morning. The first ships they encountered were not carriers, but tankers. Wasp's Air Group 14, running dangerously low on fuel, broke off to attack the fleet's oilers. The sky lit up as bombs struck the slow-moving Seiyomaru and Jinyomaru. Flames consumed their volatile cargo. The Hayasui Maru barely survived, saved only by the frantic efforts of her crew. To the west, the main Japanese fleet came under siege. Tsuikaku, the last of the Pearl Harbor strike force still afloat, was spotted. Commander Arnold, who had faced her at the Coral Sea, now led Hornet squadrons in a renewed assault. Dive bombers struck first, followed by bomb-armed Hellcats. Explosions erupted across the flight deck and below the waterline. Miraculously, despite the chaos, her crew managed to contain the fires. She would survive for now, but others would not. Hio, a light carrier in Force B, was struck by torpedoes and bombs. Explosions tore through her hangar, igniting more of that deadly, unrefined fuel. The carrier stopped dead in the water. She would sink 2 hours later, 247 men lost. Nearby, her sister ship, Junio, was also hit, but unlike Hio, she would limp away, wounded, but afloat. The southernmost group, Force C, was not spared. Chiyoda was pounded by 4 500-pound bombs that tore into her hangar bay. Her crew fought valiantly to control the damage, but for a moment, every man aboard knew she was one spark away from joining Taiho and Shokaku beneath the sea. Several American aircraft peeled off to strike the battleship Haruna. 3 bombs struck her, one penetrating deep into a turret. Her captain, quick and decisive, flooded the magazine before it could explode, narrowly avoiding disaster. After 30 minutes of chaos, the strike ended. 18 American planes were lost, but the cost inflicted on Japan was far greater. Dozens more aircraft destroyed, 3 carriers heavily damaged or sunk, and their vital fuel lifeline set ablaze. But now came the real gamble. The sun had vanished beneath the horizon. Admiral Mitscher's airmen were 275 miles away. Many were low on fuel. Some were already out. The Pacific stretched beneath them like an endless black void. Would they make it home? At 10:15 p.m., Task Force 58 picked up the returning aircraft on radar. Mitscher made a bold, almost reckless decision. He ordered all American carriers to turn on their lights. Searchlights blazed across the decks. Star shells lit the skies. It was a beacon of hope and an open invitation to lurking Japanese submarines, but it was necessary. Pilot after pilot came in too fast, too low, too disparity. Some missed the wires. Some crashed into parked aircraft. Fire crews shoved wreckage overboard to clear the way. The sea itself was soon littered with the torn remains of planes that never made it. By 12:50 a.m., the last aircraft landed, but 80 had been lost not to enemy fire, but to darkness, exhaustion, and the unforgiving ocean. Still, the strike had crippled the Japanese mobile fleet. The cost had been heavy, but the gains decisive. And yet, was this the end? Not quite. Admiral Spruance, cautious by nature and loyal to his orders to protect Saipan, refused to pursue the retreating Japanese fleet. Critics would lambast him for it. Some officers even whispered that he should be relieved of command, that he had missed a golden opportunity to finish off Japan's carrier arm for good, but history would see it differently. Because even without pursuit, Japan's carrier aviation had been broken. Of the original 450 carrier aircraft in Ozawa's fleet, only 35 returned. The once elite cadre of Japanese naval aviators, the pride of the empire, had been wiped out in 2 days. Their loss was not just tactical, it was generational. Japan did not have the time, the resources, or the fuel to train more. Aircraft could be built, carriers could be launched, but the men who flew them, they were gone. In contrast, American carriers still had hundreds of planes. Their training programs were accelerating, their radar technology was evolving, and their pilots were gaining experience and surviving. By September, the Marianas were secured. As Marines and Army units took Saipan, Tinian, and Guam after bloody battles. From these islands, B-29 superfortresses would soon take flight, their bombs destined for the heart of the Japanese mainland. And for Japan, the war had just entered a darker chapter. It was called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, a name born from awe and disbelief. American pilots returned from battle astonished at the ease of their kills. It was like shooting turkeys back home. One exclaimed, "The skies had been filled with targets, but not threats." Yet beneath that flippant nickname lay something far more sobering. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was not simply a battle of aircraft versus aircraft. It was a clash of eras. One side still fought a war of honor, skill, and the ghosts of samurai tradition clinging to shrinking oil reserves and a fading belief in the decisive naval engagement. The other wielded radar, doctrine, and mass production, with a cold, mathematical efficiency that no romantic ideal could match. When Taiho and Shokaku slipped beneath the waves, they took with them the last illusions of Japanese dominance at sea. Ozawa's fleet, though still afloat in hull and steel, had become a ghost. He returned to Japan with only 35 carrier aircraft, and fewer than 100 trained pilots left in the empire's arsenal. Many had died without firing a shot. Some had never even seen their enemy. The empire would try to fight on. It would mobilize kamikaze squadrons. It would call on boys barely old enough to shave to man its planes. It would fight at Leyte Gulf, at Iwo Jima, and finally, from bunkers in Okinawa. But the last real carrier battle Japan ever fought was here in the skies over the Philippine Sea. A battle it lost, not just in numbers, but in future. And yet, Admiral Spruance never gave chase. The Japanese fleet slipped into the night, battered, but not sunk. Was it the right call? Had he destroyed them completely? Would the kamikaze raids ever have reached such desperate heights? Could a few more hours of pursuit have shortened the war by weeks or months? Or did restraint cold? Calculating restraint prevent America from losing more than it gained? We can't know, because in history, as in war, silence often follows the loudest battles. The great fleets of wood and iron, of steel and fire, once filled oceans like cities, but now their wrecks lie quiet beneath coral and salt, while the questions they leave behind echo louder than any engine. What really breaks an empire? Is it the enemy's bombs? Or the moment its pilots stop returning home? This was the story of the Battle of the Philippine Sea, but not the end. Because barely 4 months later, in October of 1944, Japan would make one final desperate gamble, throwing every last warship into the largest naval engagement in history. The Battle of Leyte Gulf. But that is another chapter. 1. If you found this story compelling, and you believe history deserves to be remembered with depth and clarity, consider subscribing to Legacy Files. We bring the past back to life, one forgotten decision at a time.